Hold on to your sanity, thrill chasers, because Keanu Reeves, the undisputed deity of grit, grace, and earth-shaking generosity, just stumbled into a moment so wild, so soul-shatteringly unreal, it's gonna torch your expectations and demand you keep watching. Bathed in the eerie flicker of an LA street lamp, Keanu's steely gaze lands on a pitiful heap wrapped in a shredded blanket. A woman who once ruled his chaos-soaked life, now a frail, forgotten wraith drowning in a merciless urban jungle. This isn't some sappy sob story. It's the spark of a compassion explosion so monstrously mind-blowing. Hollywood's elite will be left scrambling to figure out how one man's heart could rewrite the rules of humanity in a single, unforgettable night. This isn't just a story, it's a revelation. And if you want to see how far it goes, subscribe now before it disappears. Maria had been there through it all. The heart-wrenching loss of Keanu's close friend, River Phoenix, and the devastating deaths of his daughter and fiancé. Her unwavering support provided a semblance of normalcy in a world that often seemed chaotic. In return, Keanu treated her with deep respect and kindness, often bringing her thoughtful gifts from his travels. A silk scarf from Tokyo, a handcrafted bracelet from Bali, tokens of his appreciation for her steadfast dedication. However, life took a cruel turn in 2012. Maria's husband was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. Faced with mounting medical bills and the need for constant care, she made the difficult decision to leave her position and tend to him full-time. Keanu, upon hearing the news, didn't hesitate. He provided financial assistance, ensuring they had the best medical care possible. Despite his efforts after her husband's passing, Maria vanished. The checks Keanu sent remained uncashed, and her phone was disconnected. It was as if she had been swallowed by the vast city, leaving no trace behind. A decade later, fate intervened. While driving through a less-traveled part of Los Angeles, Keanu's attention was drawn to a homeless encampment. Among the faceless crowd, a familiar figure caught his eye. Could it be Maria, the woman who had been a pillar of strength during his most vulnerable moments? He parked his car and approached cautiously. As he drew nearer, the reality became undeniable. The once vibrant and nurturing Maria now sat on the cold pavement, her spirit seemingly broken by years of hardship. Keanu's heart ached at the sight. Kneeling beside her, he gently spoke her name. Her eyes, once full of warmth, now clouded with confusion, slowly recognized the voice. "Mr. Reeves," she whispered, tears welling up. Without a moment's hesitation, Keanu extended his hand. "Let's get you out of here," he said softly. Maria hesitated, shame and pride warring within her. "I don't belong in your world anymore," she murmured, avoiding his gaze. Keanu's voice was firm yet compassionate. "You took care of me when I needed it most. Now it's my turn." With that, he helped her to her feet and guided her to his car, shielding her from the curious stares of passers-by. As they drove through the city, memories flooded back for both of them. The countless mornings Maria had brewed his favorite coffee, the late-night talks about life and loss, the silent understanding they shared. Keanu glanced over, noting the tears streaming down her face. "You're safe now," he assured her. Arriving at his residence, a place Maria once knew intimately, Keanu led her inside. The familiar scent of sandalwood and the soft hum of jazz playing in the background seemed to momentarily lift the weight off her shoulders. He showed her to a guest room, ensuring she had fresh clothes and a warm bath prepared. Over the next few days, Maria began to reclaim pieces of herself she thought were lost forever. With Keanu's unwavering support, she sought counseling and medical attention. Slowly, the shadows of her past receded, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. Inspired by her journey, Keanu and Maria collaborated to establish a foundation aimed at supporting individuals transitioning out of homelessness, providing them with resources and opportunities to rebuild their lives. Maria became a beacon of hope, sharing her story and guiding others toward a brighter future. This remarkable tale serves as a testament to the profound impact of compassion and the extraordinary lengths to which Keanu Reeves went to uplift someone who had once been his anchor. Maria settled into the guest house, but despite the warmth of a real bed and the comfort of a roof over her head, the weight of the past lingered like an unshakable shadow. Keanu watched from a distance, never pressuring, never forcing her to talk, but always ensuring she had what she needed. Days turned into weeks, and though Maria was physically safe, Keanu could see that something within her remained unsettled. She walked cautiously through the halls of his home, as if she were merely visiting, not belonging. The woman who once ran this house like clockwork, who hummed as she folded linens and brewed tea, now moved like a ghost in a place that should have felt familiar. Keanu had seen suffering before. He had lived through unbearable losses, held grief in his hands like something tangible and cruel. But this was different. Maria wasn't just grieving, she was lost. And Keanu, despite all his fame, all his resources, knew that bringing someone back from that abyss required more than just a place to stay. So he made a decision. Keanu had always lived a life of quiet generosity, never one to seek recognition for his kindness. But this wasn't about charity. This was about purpose, and purpose required action. One morning, Keanu left Maria a handwritten note on the kitchen table. It was short, just a few words scrawled in his signature, slightly messy handwriting. "Meet me in the garage when you're ready." Maria hesitated when she saw it. She wasn't sure what to expect, but something about the note felt different. There was no obligation, no expectation, just an invitation. When she finally walked into the garage, Keanu was already there, leaning against one of his motorcycles, arms crossed, a faint, knowing smile playing at the corners of his lips. The garage was an extension of who he was, an organized chaos of tools, spare parts, and half-assembled bikes. This was his escape, the place where the world quieted down, where his thoughts could settle. Without a word, he handed Maria a helmet. She hesitated, looking at him with uncertainty. It had been years since she had done anything remotely spontaneous. The streets had conditioned her to avoid risks, to stay in familiar spaces, to never take a step that could lead to a dangerous fall. But here now, with Keanu holding out a helmet like an unspoken challenge, something stirred inside her. She took it. The engine roared to life beneath them, the deep, resonant sound echoing through the garage. Maria clung to Keanu as they pulled onto the road, the wind whipping against her face, the city blurring past. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. And for the first time in years, Maria felt alive. Keanu didn't have a destination in mind. That wasn't the point. He wove through the streets of Los Angeles, past the towering glass buildings, through the quiet, forgotten corners of the city, the places where stories got lost and people slipped through the cracks. Maria had spent years trapped in those cracks. She held tighter as they rode past a row of tents lining a sidewalk, faces she recognized, people she had once known, some who had disappeared long before she did. Keanu slowed the bike, pulling over at a small, inconspicuous lot next to an unmarked building. He took off his helmet, ruffling his hair absent-mindedly, and gestured for Maria to follow. The building was nothing special from the outside, just another warehouse among thousands in Los Angeles. But inside, Maria's breath caught. It wasn't just a warehouse, it was something more. Scattered throughout the vast open space were rows of neatly stacked supplies, sleeping bags, warm coats, boxes of non-perishable food. Volunteers moved with quiet efficiency, sorting donations, packing bags, organizing aid. It was a lifeline for the people Maria had once shared the streets with. Keanu had brought her to a place that understood her struggle in a way no amount of well-intended charity galas or celebrity fundraisers ever could. "Every person here," Keanu said softly, finally breaking the silence, "knows what it's like to lose everything." Maria swallowed hard. "This isn't a shelter," he continued. "It's a restart, no handouts, just people helping people get back on their feet." Maria took a step forward, looking around. The way people moved, the way they spoke, there was dignity in it, a quiet resilience. They weren't just being helped, they were reclaiming something. Keanu knew what he was doing. He wasn't forcing her into anything, wasn't handing her an easy way out. He was showing her something she had forgotten, the power of rebuilding. Maria didn't need saving. She needed a reason to save herself. Maria started coming to the center every day. At first, she kept to herself, sorting supplies, folding blankets, keeping busy in the background. But little by little, she found herself drawn into conversations. A woman asked her how she had ended up homeless. Maria hesitated before answering. Then, for the first time in years, she told her story. She expected pity. Instead, she saw recognition. Others started sharing, too. Stories of loss, of survival, of resilience. And Maria, without even realizing it, began to step into a role she never expected, someone who could make a difference. Keanu watched from a distance, a quiet satisfaction settling in his chest. He had always believed that Maria had more to offer than she realized. But this was beyond what he had hoped for. One evening, after a long day at the center, Maria sat across from Keanu in his kitchen. The exhaustion on her face was different now, not the weariness of the streets, but the exhaustion that comes from meaningful work. She looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "I want to do more." Keanu simply nodded. Because he had known, from the moment he found her under that bridge, that this wasn't just about taking someone off the streets. It was about giving someone their life back. And Maria was finally ready to take it. Keanu Reeves had always believed in the quiet power of resilience. He had seen it in people who had faced the worst that life could throw at them and still found a way to rise. But watching Maria transform, watching her reclaim her life piece by piece, was something else entirely. It wasn't just survival, it was something more profound. A rebirth. She had gone from a woman too afraid to take up space in his home to someone who walked with purpose through the community center, lifting others the way she had once needed lifting. But Keanu knew that recovery wasn't a straight road. There were still parts of her journey that hadn't been faced yet. There were still ghosts lingering in the shadows of her past, ones she had yet to confront. And one of those ghosts was about to come knocking. It started with a phone call, a number Keanu didn't recognize. He almost ignored it, but something made him pick up. The voice on the other end was hesitant, unfamiliar. "I'm looking for Maria Thompson," the man said. "She used to work for you." Keanu's grip on the phone tightened. He didn't say anything at first, waiting. The man hesitated before speaking again. "I knew her from before she disappeared." There was something about the way he said it that set Keanu on edge. He had spent years in an industry filled with people who could spin any story into something else entirely, who could twist words until they barely resembled the truth. But this voice, it didn't sound like someone with an agenda. It sounded like someone who had been searching for a long time. Keanu asked him to meet. They met at a small cafe off a quiet street far from the noise of Hollywood. The man was older, his hair graying at the temples, his suit well-worn but neat. He introduced himself as James, and when he spoke of Maria, there was something heavy in his voice, guilt, regret, something deeper. "I should have done more," James admitted. "I tried to find her after her husband passed, but she vanished. She just fell off the map. I figured she wanted to be left alone, but I should have tried harder." Keanu listened, his mind turning over the possibilities. He had never pushed Maria to talk about the years she spent on the streets. He had let her share on her own terms. But James' presence made something clear. There was more to her story than even Keanu knew. James slid a small, weathered envelope across the table. "She'll want to see this," he said. "Or maybe she won't, but she deserves to know." Keanu took the envelope without opening it. He had learned long ago that some things had to be faced in their own time. When he got home, Maria was in the backyard, sitting on the wooden steps leading down to the garden. She had been spending more time outside lately, soaking in the quiet, letting herself breathe. He sat beside her, placing the envelope between them without a word. Maria stared at it for a long moment before finally picking it up. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned it over. The handwriting on the front was familiar, and when she slid the letter out, her breath caught. It was from her husband. A letter written before he passed, one she had never received. Keanu didn't watch her read it. He simply stayed beside her, present but silent, as she pieced together whatever words had been left behind. He knew what it was like to carry a weight you never got to set down. The unfinished conversations, the unsaid goodbyes. Maria's shoulders shook, but she didn't break. Not like she would have weeks ago. She wasn't the same woman Keanu had found under that bridge. She was stronger now. She wiped her eyes and exhaled. "I didn't know he wrote this," she said quietly. Keanu only nodded, letting the moment be hers. Something shifted after that day. It wasn't a dramatic change, not at first, but Keanu saw it. The way Maria held herself differently, the way she spoke with more certainty. She had faced one of the final pieces of her past, and instead of being crushed under it, she had come through. But Keanu also knew the journey wasn't over. There was still one last thing Maria hadn't done. She hadn't gone back. She hadn't returned to the place where everything had unraveled. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Keanu found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of tea she hadn't touched. "I want to see it," she finally said. Keanu understood immediately. The next morning they drove together, back to the house she had lost. The neighborhood hadn't changed much. The house itself was different, of course. New owners, a different coat of paint, a new car in the driveway, but the bones of it were still the same. Maria stood on the sidewalk, her arms wrapped around herself, looking up at the windows she had once stared out of every morning. Keanu didn't say anything, he just waited. She finally exhaled, stepping forward. Not to go inside, that part of her life was over, but just to be there to see it, to say goodbye on her own terms. She stood there for a long moment before finally turning to Keanu, and for the first time since he had found her, she smiled, not the hesitant, uncertain smiles of before, a real one. "I'm ready," she said. Keanu nodded, because he knew she wasn't just saying she was ready to leave this place behind. She was ready for whatever came next. Keanu Reeves had always understood that healing wasn't a straight path. It twisted, turned, sometimes even circled back on itself. He had walked that road himself, more times than he cared to count. And now, as he watched Maria take her first real step into the future, he knew the journey was far from over. She had faced her past, but that didn't mean it was done with her. The weight of memory still clung to her, even as she stood taller, even as her voice carried more certainty. Keanu saw it in the way her fingers sometimes traced the edge of a table absent-mindedly, as if grounding herself. In the way she would pause before opening a door, like she was bracing for something unseen. It wasn't fear, not anymore. It was something deeper. The knowledge that the world could take everything from you in an instant, that no matter how safe you felt, loss could be waiting just around the corner. Keanu understood that feeling better than most. And he knew there was only one way forward. He had never been the type to push people, but this time, he took action before Maria had the chance to second-guess herself. One morning, she woke to find a small envelope left on the kitchen table, her name scrawled on the front in Keanu's distinct, hurried handwriting. Inside was a one-way ticket, not away from him, but towards something she had been avoiding. New York. Maria hadn't been back since her husband died. It was where they had started their life together, where they had built everything they had before it all fell apart. It was also where she had lost herself. She stared at the ticket for a long time. When she finally looked up, Keanu was leaning against the doorway, watching her with that quiet patience of his. He didn't have to say anything. The message was clear. It was time, and she wasn't going alone. Keanu didn't do things halfway. When he committed to something, to someone, he saw it through. So when the plane touched down at JFK, Maria wasn't stepping into the past alone. He was right there beside her. New York hit differently than Los Angeles. The city was sharp, fast, unrelenting. The wind cut through the streets like a blade, the smell of roasting chestnuts clashing against the gasoline and steel of the traffic-clogged avenues. Everything moved at breakneck speed, and yet Maria seemed frozen in time as she stood outside the building she and her husband had once called home. It was strange how places could hold ghosts, even when they looked nothing like they used to. The door was a different color. The windows now had shutters that hadn't been there before, but it was still the same. Keanu stayed a step behind her, letting her take the lead. She didn't go inside. She didn't need to, but she stood there facing the place where she had lost so much, and for the first time she didn't turn away. It wasn't easy. The past never let go that easily, but she didn't break. Keanu had always known she wouldn't. They didn't stay long, just enough for her to see it, to acknowledge it, to know that she could stand there and still keep moving forward. The trip could have ended there. Maria could have returned to Los Angeles, closed that chapter of her life for good, but fate had other plans. Keanu had barely gotten comfortable in his hotel room when his phone buzzed. A message, short, direct, a name. Someone wanted to meet with him. He wasn't surprised. Even in a city as vast as New York, his presence never went unnoticed. But this wasn't about a movie deal or an interview or some Hollywood executive looking to pitch their next big project. This was personal. He debated ignoring it. He didn't owe anyone anything, but something about the message felt different, so he went. The meeting place was a small bookstore tucked into a side street that most tourists never noticed. When he walked inside, it smelled like old paper and dust, the kind of place that had existed for decades, untouched by time. The man waiting for him was older, his suit too polished for someone sitting in a forgotten bookstore. He looked like he belonged in a boardroom, not surrounded by shelves of worn novels. He didn't introduce himself. He simply placed a folder on the table between them and slid it forward. Keanu didn't touch it. The man spoke first. "You're trying to help her." It wasn't a question. Keanu didn't answer. The man leaned back, studying him. "You don't know everything." Keanu finally looked down at the folder. He had been in this position before. People always had their own versions of the truth, their own angles, their own agendas. But when he finally opened it, what he saw wasn't what he expected. It was Maria. Not just pictures of her on the streets, but documents, records, medical files, a history she had never mentioned. The man folded his hands together. "She's not who you think she is." Keanu's jaw tightened. "She's exactly who I think she is." The man sighed. "She disappeared for a reason. She didn't just lose everything, she ran." Keanu closed the folder. He had seen enough. Whatever this man thought he was revealing, it didn't change anything. He stood ready to leave, but the man's next words stopped him. "She's in danger." That was when Keanu finally turned back. There were a lot of things people could say to him that he could ignore, but this wasn't one of them. The man's voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. She was part of something she wasn't supposed to be part of. Her husband, he owed people. When he died, that debt didn't just disappear. Keanu's fingers curled into fists at his sides. He didn't need to hear more. He already knew what he was going to do. He was going to fix it. Maria had fought long enough. She had lost enough. Now it was Keanu's turn to fight for her. And whoever thought they could come after her now, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Keanu Reeves had spent years perfecting the art of control. It was necessary in his world. Fame had made him a target before, of lies, of false friendships, of people trying to manipulate their way into his life. He had learned to read between the lines, to anticipate trouble before it arrived. But this was different. This wasn't a tabloid headline waiting to be disproven. This wasn't a producer playing games with contract negotiations. This was real danger, pressing down on him like the weight of an oncoming storm. Maria knew something she hadn't told him. And whoever was after her was willing to do whatever it took to get it. She sat across from him in the dim hotel room, the city lights flickering through the window, casting long shadows on the walls. She looked smaller than usual, her arms wrapped around herself, fingers gripping the fabric of her sleeves like she was trying to hold herself together. Keanu leaned forward, his hands clasped, his voice even. "What are they after?" Maria's gaze dropped to the floor. Her silence stretched, heavy and uncertain. He didn't push, not yet, but the air between them thickened with the weight of what she wasn't saying. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. It wasn't just debt. Keanu didn't move, but something in his expression hardened. "My husband didn't just borrow money," she continued. "He stole something important, and when he died, they thought I had it." Keanu exhaled slowly. This was worse than he had expected. Debt was one thing. Debts could be paid, even negotiated. But theft, that was a different kind of problem. He pressed his fingertips together, considering, what was it? Maria swallowed hard, as if saying it aloud would make it real again. "A ledger." Keanu's eyes narrowed. "A ledger of what?" Maria hesitated, then lifted her gaze to meet his. "Names." That changed everything. Keanu sat back, his mind already racing. If what she was saying was true, this wasn't just about stolen money. Someone, maybe multiple people, had something to lose if that ledger ever surfaced. And if they believed Maria had it, they wouldn't stop coming. He stood abruptly, running a hand through his hair. He needed to think, needed to figure out the next move before they lost control of the situation. Maria watched him, her expression tight with guilt. "I should have told you sooner." Keanu shook his head. This wasn't about blame. This was about survival. He grabbed his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. It rang twice before a voice answered, sharp and alert. "You felt that, didn't you? That was no ordinary moment. If it hit you, hit like and let's keep going. You're calling me, that means trouble." Keanu didn't bother denying it. "I need intel on a man in New York. Dangerous, connected. Find out who he works with, what his weaknesses are." There was a brief pause before the voice responded. "Text me a name. I'll get back to you." Keanu ended the call. He wasn't going into this blind. If someone thought they could threaten Maria, they were going to learn the hard way that they had underestimated the wrong man. An hour later, the information came through. The man from the club, his name was Victor Lazaro. A power broker, a man who operated in the space between the criminal underworld and the legitimate elite. He didn't get his hands dirty, but he didn't have to. He had people for that. The kind of people who made problems disappear. And now, Keanu and Maria were a problem. Keanu's mind worked fast. If Lazaro still believed Maria had the ledger, he wouldn't stop. And the longer they stayed in one place, the more vulnerable they were. They had to move. Keanu packed quickly, shoving only the essentials into a duffel bag. Maria didn't argue. She simply followed his lead, her fear evident but controlled. She trusted him. They slipped out through the back entrance of the hotel, avoiding the main lobby, keeping to the side streets where cameras were scarce. Keanu kept his head down, his senses heightened, scanning for any signs that they were being watched. They needed a safe house, and Keanu knew just the place. A brownstone in Brooklyn. It belonged to an old friend, someone who owed him a favor. It was secure, off the grid, the kind of place where they could regroup and figure out their next move. By the time they arrived, the sky had shifted from deep blue to the soft edges of dawn. The house was dark, the street quiet. Keanu let them inside, locking the door behind them. Maria sank onto the couch, exhaustion pulling at her features. Keanu didn't sleep. He stayed near the window, watching, waiting. He knew this wasn't over. And he was right. Because just as the sun broke the horizon, his phone buzzed again. A single message. "We know where you are." Keanu felt his pulse slow, steady, controlled. They had been found, which meant it was time to stop running. It was time to fight back. Keanu Reeves stared at the message on his phone, its meaning settling deep into his bones. "We know where you are." It wasn't a warning, it was a promise. He had expected this. Lazaro wasn't the kind of man who sent empty threats. Keanu had spent enough time around powerful people to know that the ones who moved in silence were the most dangerous. And now, Maria wasn't just being hunted, she was cornered. The brownstone was no longer safe. He glanced over at Maria. She was curled up on the couch, exhaustion pulling her under. She hadn't slept in what felt like days. He debated waking her, but she needed rest, and right now, every second counted. Keanu moved through the house in measured silence, checking every window, every door, reinforcing what little security they had. But he knew it wouldn't be enough. They needed to disappear. Again. Except this time, Keanu wasn't interested in just running. He had been playing defense since this started, staying 2 steps ahead, but it wasn't enough. If they wanted to end this, they had to stop running. They had to go on the offensive. His phone buzzed again, a different number, one he had been waiting for. He answered without hesitation. "Tell me you found something," Keanu said, voice low. The man on the other end exhaled sharply. "It's worse than you think." Keanu didn't flinch. "Explain." "Lazaro doesn't just want the ledger," the voice continued. "He needs it. His entire operation depends on it staying buried. And here's the problem. He doesn't believe Maria doesn't have it. As far as he's concerned, she's the only loose end left." Keanu clenched his jaw. He had expected something like this, but hearing it confirmed made the situation feel heavier. "What's in the ledger?" Keanu asked. A pause, then the answer came. Blackmail, every name tied to his empire, government officials, businessmen, cops, some of the most powerful people in the city. If that ledger gets out, Lazaro doesn't just lose, he burns. Keanu exhaled, his mind already forming a plan. And if Maria doesn't have it? The response was cold. Then she's a liability, and liabilities get eliminated. Keanu's grip on the phone tightened. Not this one. He ended the call and turned toward Maria. She was awake now, watching him, the tension in her shoulders clear. "They're coming," she said quietly. Keanu nodded. "Yeah." She swallowed hard. "What do we do?" He met her gaze, his voice was steady, unshakable. "We end this." Keanu didn't believe in unnecessary violence. He had spent his entire life avoiding becoming the kind of man who used force as a first response. But he also knew when to stand his ground. And right now, there was only one way to stop this. They had to take the fight to Lazaro. Keanu had seen enough in his life to know that men like Lazaro were cowards beneath the surface. They surrounded themselves with power, but when that power crumbled, they had nothing left. If they could take that away, if they could cut the legs out from under him, he would have no choice but to back down. And they had just the weapon to do it. If the ledger was as important as Keanu's contact claimed, then Lazaro wasn't the only one who wanted it to stay hidden. There were names in that book that didn't want to be found, which meant Keanu had leverage. They needed to find the ledger before Lazaro did. There was only one place to start looking. Maria's old apartment. It had been her husband's last known address, the last place he had lived before everything fell apart. If the ledger had been hidden anywhere, It was there. Keanu didn't waste time. Within an hour, they were on the move, slipping through the city under cover of darkness. He had taken precautions, alternate routes, burner phones, a rental car with plates that couldn't be traced back to him. But he knew it wouldn't take long before Lazaro's men caught wind of where they were going. When they reached the building, Keanu scanned the street. No tails, no parked cars that didn't belong, but that didn't mean they weren't being watched. They moved quickly. Maria led the way up the narrow stairwell, her fingers shaking slightly as she turned the key in the lock of her old unit. The door creaked open, revealing a space frozen in time. Dust covered everything. Furniture remained untouched. The air was stale, thick with years of abandonment. Maria hesitated in the doorway. Keanu placed a steadying hand on her back, grounding her. "We don't have much time," he said. She nodded and moved inside. They searched everything. Drawers, closets, floorboards. They overturned cushions, ripped open vents, checked inside walls where something could have been stashed. But there was nothing. It wasn't here. Keanu swore under his breath. Time was running out. Maria sat heavily on the edge of an old couch, frustration evident in her face. "It has to be somewhere," she whispered. "He wouldn't have just left it out in the open." Keanu's mind worked fast. There was another possibility. What if her husband hadn't hidden it in the apartment? What if he had hidden it inside something? Keanu's gaze swept the room, searching for anything that felt out of place. Then, his eyes landed on a framed photograph sitting on the bookshelf. A picture of Maria and her husband. Keanu stepped forward, picking it up. It was heavier than it should have been. Carefully, he turned it over and removed the backing. His breath caught. Inside, wedged behind the photograph, was a small, leather-bound book. The ledger. Keanu pulled it free, flipping it open. Pages and pages of names, numbers, transactions. It was all there. Maria covered her mouth, her eyes wide. "Oh my God." Keanu snapped the book shut. They had what they needed. Now they had to get out. But before they could move, a sound shattered the silence. The creak of a door opening downstairs. They weren't alone. Keanu's entire body went on high alert. He pressed a finger to his lips, signaling Maria to stay quiet. Footsteps echoed up the stairwell, slow, controlled. Keanu moved fast. He tucked the ledger into his jacket, grabbed Maria by the wrist, and pulled her toward the fire escape. They were halfway out the window when the first gunshot rang out. Glass shattered. Maria gasped. Keanu shoved her forward, urgency burning through him. "Go." They climbed down the fire escape as more shots followed, bullets ricocheting off metal. By the time they hit the alleyway below, Keanu could hear voices shouting from above. They had been seen. They ran. Keanu didn't stop. He didn't look back. The city blurred around them as they disappeared into the night, the ledger pressed tight against his chest. They had what they needed. But now Lazaro knew it. And he would do anything to get it back. Keanu Reeves had been in high-speed chases before. He had dodged bullets, fought impossible odds, faced enemies that seemed larger than life. But this wasn't a film. There was no stunt double, no carefully scripted ending. This was real, and the stakes had never been higher. He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white as the car tore through the darkened streets of New York. Maria sat beside him, her breathing ragged. The ledger clutched against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Behind them, headlights sliced through the night, engines roaring, tires screeching. Lazaro's men were closing in. The city blurred past, neon lights reflecting in the rain-slicked streets. Keanu's mind raced through possibilities. Running wasn't enough. They had the ledger, but as long as Lazaro was hunting them, they would never be safe. They had to finish this. He took a sharp turn, skidding onto an industrial road near the docks. The cold wind howled through the gaps between shipping containers. the scent of salt water thick in the air. This was the place, the battleground where everything would be decided. Maria's fingers dug into the seat. "Keanu, what are we doing?" He didn't answer. He just reached into the glove compartment and pulled out something small, metallic, a burner phone. He dialed. A single ring, then a voice. "You have it." Keanu's jaw tightened. "I do, and if you want it, you'll come alone." There was a pause, then Lazaro chuckled. "Brave of you, Mr. Reeves." Keanu's voice was ice. "No, just tired of running." He hung up. Maria stared at him. "You're handing it over." Keanu turned to her, eyes sharp, steady. "No, I'm exposing it." She blinked, but... He reached over, gently gripping her shoulder. "Trust me." She hesitated, then nodded. Minutes passed. The night stretched thin, tense. Then headlights cut through the darkness. A sleek black car rolled to a stop 20 feet away. The doors opened. Lazaro stepped out, flanked by two men. He was calm, too calm. Keanu stepped forward, holding the ledger in one hand. "You wanted this." Lazaro smiled. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Now be even smarter. Give it to me and we walk away. No harm done." Keanu exhaled slowly. "You really think I'd be standing here if I didn't have a plan?" Lazaro's smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" Keanu took another step forward, his presence towering, unshaken. "This ledger," he lifted it. "It's already been copied, every name, every transaction." Lazaro's expression darkened. Keanu continued, voice like steel. "And do you know where that copy is right now? In the hands of someone who hates corruption more than I do." Lazaro's fingers curled into fists. Keanu tilted his head. "You know who I mean, don't you? The kind of person who doesn't take bribes. The kind of person who'd love to watch your entire empire burn." Silence. Then Lazaro's face twisted in rage. "You think you can?" A distant siren. Then another. Lazaro's eyes widened. The sound was coming from everywhere. Keanu smiled. "You're done." Before Lazaro could react, blue and red lights exploded into the night. Squad cars screeched into the docks from every direction. Armed officers poured out, guns drawn. Helicopters hovered above, their searchlights cutting through the dark. Lazaro's men tried to scatter, but they were already surrounded. Keanu had played them. Lazaro lunged forward, his face contorted with fury. "You." Keanu didn't move. He didn't flinch. He just stared Lazaro down, watching as everything the man had built came crashing down around him. Officers grabbed Lazaro, forcing him to the ground. He thrashed, snarling, "I own this city, I own." His voice was drowned out by the wail of sirens. Keanu exhaled, the tension in his chest finally easing. It was over. Maria stepped beside him, her hands shaking. "Did that just happen?" Keanu turned to her. "You're free." For the first time in years, she breathed. Days passed. The story made headlines everywhere. Corruption, scandal, the downfall of one of the most powerful underworld figures in the city. But through it all, Keanu stayed in the background, never stepping forward for credit, never seeking recognition. That wasn't why he did it. He did it because it was right. And Maria, she lived. Not just survived, lived. She went back to Lowe's Angels, started fresh. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't afraid. She was something stronger than she had ever been. Keanu stayed in New York a little longer, watching from a distance, making sure everything had truly settled. Then one morning he packed a small bag, slung it over his shoulder and walked away. No fanfare, no dramatic farewell. Because that's who he was. Not just a movie star. Not just an action hero. A man who never turned his back on those who needed him. And somewhere, as he stepped into the sunrise, another story waited for him. Because that's what Keanu Reeves did. He didn't just make movies. He made the world better. If you enjoyed this story, there's another video on screen right now. Go ahead and give it a look for an even more astonishing tale. And don't forget, we'll have many more uplifting and dramatic stories coming your way. So make sure you subscribe to our channel. That way you'll never miss our newest uploads.